Shalom Israel, Shalom family. This topic is going to be on the inhumanity and insane Thomas Jefferson, one of Babylon's beloved forefathers, founding fathers, which was nothing more than a pure Edomite. A pure Edomite. You can see in the painting that he's a pure Edomite. Definitely not white, obviously. His turtleneck is white and his skin is red and pink. Alright? So from the title you can see what this article is about. It says Thomas Jefferson was a horrible man who owned 600 human beings, raped them. Now, these weren't just men, these weren't just women, but it was men and children too. He said 600 slaves and he raped them and literally worked them to death. Literally worked them to death. And this is from July 7th, 2017, from Sean King. Check him out on Twitter. It says, earlier this week, a room connected to the Monticello home of Thomas Jefferson was discovered to have been the living quarters for Sally Hemings. As the news broke of the discovery, many headlines referred to Hemings as Jefferson's mistress, but she was not a mistress. Now let's, see who she is, Sally Hemings. It says Sarah Sally Hemings, and he probably gave her the name Sarah because that reminded him of an Edomite, because Sarah is the name of one of our righteous foremothers, the wife of Abraham. It says Sarah Sally Hemings was an enslaved woman of a mixed race. Now, the things that describe what she went through, she wasn't mixed. Her father had to be a Jake, and her mother, I don't know. But I will assume that her father was a Jake, an Israelite. And she was born in Charles City County, Virginia, and died in Charlottesville, Virginia. And you know how those Edomites are in Charlottesville, right? Make America great again, which it will never will be, because it's on the brink of end. It's crumbling. How the ancient Roman Empire crumbled. Says most historians believe Jefferson was the father for 6 children born after the death of his wife, Martha Jefferson. All right. So now back to here. All right. It says mistress implies consent. Thomas Jefferson owned Sally Hemings. She was his legal property. Thomas and Martha Jefferson owned Sally from the time she was an infant. So Sarah Hemings was owned since she was an infant. That's the curses. Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. You think that her parents you think her parents weren't distraught and crying out day and night trying to get their daughter back? But they couldn't, because that's the curses. That's the curses that we just read, that they would be given, the children, sons and daughters will be given into another people, and you can't do nothing about it. It says she could not leave, she was not free. Both Martha and Thomas Jefferson refused to free Sally Hemings their entire lives. Hemings remained enslaved at Monticello into her 50s. Right? So, not only was Thomas Jefferson a wicked man, but the wife too. They didn't want to let her go her whole entire life. Which leads me to this precept. Psalms chapter 13 and verse 2. Actually, before I get that, want to get something else. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 7. It says, I have seen servants upon horses. Right, because these Edomites supposed to be our servants. But now they're up on horses. They have the power. They're high and mighty. They lend to us, and we can't lend to them. Right? I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. Right, we're walking as slaves upon the earth, man. Sally Hemings is a prime example. It says when a man has sex with a human being he owns, consent is forced, no matter the circumstance. Right. And Sarah could have been on her she could have been at time in a month and Thomas Jefferson still will go into her. Because they're profane and wicked. It says this is doubly true of any enslaved African living at Monticello. And these weren't Africans, these were Israelites. It wasn't prophesied for Africans to go on slavery on slave ships. That was only prophesied to the Israelites. It says where whippings and punishments have been well documented. Hemings and others enslaved there had no sincere choice but to serve those who claimed ownership over them or suffer the consequences. So they had to do what they said to do or suffer the consequences. This fundamental principle is a bedrock of slavery. It does not exist with it. It does not exist without it. And that goes to the curse Deuteronomy 28 and 48. Get straight to the point. He shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck. Because that yoke of iron on their neck, now they can't, they have to suffer the consequences if they don't listen to their slave owner, to their slave master. They got to do what they say to do. And this is Psalms 13 and verse 2. It says, how long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? Being a slave, being an Israelite in today's society, we have sorrow in our heart daily because we have servants that are on the loose above us. And especially back then in the slavery times. It says, how long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? How long is our enemies going to be exalted over us? Because that's what's happening. Because they really boasting and bragging about this. Because they knew how Thomas Jefferson was before Sean King did this article. But you know, he's in all the textbooks and curriculums, and he discovered lightning. And how the hell a mortal man discover lightning? Does man control lightning? Lightning and thunder? No. The Heavenly Father does. See if I can find a precept on that. Job chapter 28 and verse 26. I'm going to start at verse 25. Job 28 and 25. To make the weight for the winds, and he weighed the waters by measure. When he made a decree for the rain, and a way for the lightning of the thunder. But here it is. You have this man, Thomas Jefferson, who so-called single-handedly discovered lightning. No, the Most High did. So the wicked is still exalted above us right now. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 94, and verse 3. It says, Lord, how long shall the wicked triumph? Because the so-called white man, Esau, has been in power since the Renaissance. And that's like 700 years, 800 years. It says, how long shall they utter and speak hard things? And all the workers of iniquity boast themselves. Because that's what they do. The workers of iniquity boast themselves. They boast themselves with something called President's Day, when all the presidents had slaves and probably did things, if not worse than Thomas Jefferson, or just as bad. So it's a mockery, it's a smack in the face, so to speak. Now, let me see. To to romanticize Sally Hemings as a mistress to Thomas Jefferson is to romanticize the horrible institution of slavery. Right, because there was no romance about that. That young Israelite woman was forced against her will to lay with a Edomite man. It says that 600 human beings beings forced into slavery by Thomas Jefferson were forced to be there from birth unto death. So these slaves was working there from birth unto death. It says many never even leaving the confines of the land that entire time. So these slaves were there the whole time, and they couldn't even leave the plantation. They couldn't even leave the plantation. Over 400 beings that were immediately forced into slavery were born at Monticello. Many there long enough to see generations of their families forced into slavery. Jefferson's nail factory was exclusively staffed by enslaved children, not even enslaved men and women, but by children. Their living conditions were deplorable. Let's look up what deplorable means. Let's look up deplorable. Deserving strong condemnation. So the living conditions were unworthy, unexcusable, unforgivable, shameful, and disgraceful, diabolical, atrocious, dreadful, terrible, unfortunate, regrettable. That's how the living conditions were. Over the course of Jefferson's life, he sold at least 175 men, women, and children to other owners, ripping apart families and loved ones. And that's the curse. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 32. And I'm going to bring this precept out. Jeremiah chapter 22 and verse 13. It says, woe unto him, death and destruction to him. Woe unto him that buildeth his house by unrighteousness. Because Jefferson's house was built on slavery. And it built on slavery, and none of them were set free. So it was by unrighteousness, and his chambers by wrong, that useth his neighbor's service without wages, and giveth him not for his work. You working, here it is, you working your whole life, and you don't even get to leave the plantation. You don't even get to see what the city looks like. You're not even left free. Not even left free. And he didn't just wake up one morning and think that him and his wife and the other slave owners had long discussions and plots on this. This is Psalms chapter 64 and verse 6. It says they search out iniquities. Right, this is an iniquity to have the Israelites, the Most High chosen people, in slavery and never leave the plantation and work there their entire lives and be forced to lay with a wretched Edomite. It says they search out iniquities, they accomplish a diligent search. They're successful at that. They're wicked to the core. There's not one to do of good. It says both the inward thought of every one of them in the heart is deep. But the Most High shall shoot at them with an arrow, nuclear destruction, ICBM missiles. Suddenly shall they be wounded, because they're going to be wounded like a thief in the night. When they say peace and safety, suddenly it should be destruction. It says, I'm going to call it Sarah. not Sally. Sarah Hemings was just 14 years old when Thomas Jefferson began using her for sex. So she was only 14 years old when this Edomite started using her for sex. Hemings was just 16 years old when she had her first child by him. This continued unabated for decades. It's not love, it's not romantic, it's sexual assault and sexual abuse. The children that were produced from this were also forced into slavery. Again, that's not love or kindness, that's an unspeakable horror. And here, these Edomites are so retarded that they don't know the child is what the father is. So he's putting his own kind into slavery. That shows the wickedness of an Edomite and the dumbness of an Edomite. They're dull of understanding, the stupidity of an Edomite. It's the book of Habakkuk, or Habakkuk, chapter 2, and verse 12. It says, woe to him that buildeth a town with blood and establish a city by iniquity. Because the Edomites, they're going to have to pay for this. The scriptures say death and destruction to him that built a city by blood and iniquity. And that's how he built his fortune. Now, it's Habakkuk 2 and 5. It says, yea, also, because he transgresseth by wine, right? He transgresseth by wine because these Edomites were drunk with power, saying they could have the Israelites as slaves. And still having slavery to this day. With the education system and economy, financial state, and the chain gang in Louisiana and the South, Alabama, when these jakes get locked up, the chain gang, you know, they still slaves. They still gotta work sun up to sundown and only get 7 cents a day, and not have enough money at the end of the week for one single honey bun. It says he is a proud man. If 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 Esau isn't the proud of the earth, I don't know who is. Because Arabs aren't that proud like an Edomite. Arabs are not that proud like an Edomite. So Esau is not the Arabs. Esau is a so-called white man. He's a proud man, neither keepeth at home. He don't keep at home because they move from place to place. First they wanted to live in Greece. Then they want to be Romans. Then they want to be the French. They want to be great. They want to be from Britain. They want to be the British. They want to be Spaniards, Caucasians. Now they want to be so-called Americans. So it says, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, because they're greedy. They're greedy bastards. They can't never get enough. It says, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. They cannot be satisfied. 600 slaves, all that money, and he couldn't let them go. Can never be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Now, not all nations and all people is talking about the other nations, because he got them drunk off the wine of Babylon. But on top of that, all nations, because you had Israelites enslaved from all nations throughout the 12 tribes. All right, let's keep going. Mr. King goes on to say, I generally view men like Thomas Jefferson in the same way I view any other intelligent, gifted leader who also happened to be cruel beyond belief. Right, because they're intelligent and gifted on the left hand side. Says he was a monster, owning, buying, selling, trading, and raping human beings. No matter what year or era you did such things is monstrous. And that's every Edomite. And look at this. It says what's particularly interesting about Jefferson is that he was smart enough and educated enough to know full well that the institution of slavery was wrong. In his only published book, now this is where it gets good. This is where it gets juicy. In his only published book, Notes on the State of Virginia, Jefferson openly stated he knew slavery was morally evil. He didn't say it was bad. He didn't say it was unjust. He didn't say it was corrupt or disgusting. He says he knew slavery was morally evil. Evil. He knew that slavery was evil. Wicked, immoral, sinful, foul, vile, dishonorable, corrupt, depraved, reprobate, villainous, nefarious, vicious, malicious. All right? He knew that it was morally evil. That just shows you the pure wickedness of the so-called white man. It's really mind-boggling to me, because you had the coons that aren't in the truth, right? Or some that are in the truth. They believe, they say, okay, well, this white person not that bad. He's smart. He has money. He's smiling in my face. All that. Well, isn't that how they portrayed Thomas Jefferson in school? Weren't you grown up and groomed to think that he was a honest citizen, an honest person? That's why the scriptures say is none that doeth good. Let's see if I can find that real quick. Psalms chapter 53 and verse 1. The fool hath said in his heart, there was no power. Corrupt are they, and have done abominable iniquity. Slavery was an abominable iniquity they did to the Most High chosen people. It says, there is none that doeth good. There's not one Edomite that's good. I don't care how much time he pat you on your back or give you food. It's not one that's good. They might entreat you well, but that don't mean they're good. It says he knew slavery was morally evil, and that the nation, what nation? The nation of Babylon, right? The nation of Babylon. And here it is right here. Revelation chapter 18 and verse 4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye not be partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached into heaven, and God have remembered her iniquities. Who is that talking about? Let's get another precept. Isaiah chapter 47 and verse 1. It says, come down and sit in the dust, meaning a low estate, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There was no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Because it's being exposed right now. It says that the nation would eventually have to account to the Most High for what it had done to tens of millions of enslaved Africans. And they weren't Africans, they were Israelites. That's why this is written right here in the book of Zechariah, chapter 1 and verse 14. It says, so the angel that communed with me said unto me, cry thou, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion for great jealousy. And I'm very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. Because these Edomites are at ease right now, man. They're at ease right now. And to be quite frank, I don't blame them, because once the Messiah comes back, it's not going to get no better for them. It's going to be the worst nightmare they're going to have to live through for a long time. It says, and I'm very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease, for I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. Right, they helped forward the affliction of what the nation of Israel had to go through. They helped forward the affliction. But you know why they did? Because that's their lot. But they still gotta pay for it. This and they're the Most High's wicked weapon. Slakia. Psalms chapter 17 and verse 13. Arise, O Lord, disappoint him, cast him down. Talking about Babylon, these Edomites. Deliver my soul from the wicked, which is thy sword. Because they help forward the affliction of what happened to us. And Thomas Jefferson exposed the hell out of himself, man. And you know Edomites read this book. You know historians read this book. You know they did. Since he said that, I'm gonna stay on that part for a little bit. Here it is highlighted for you. This is the book Obadiah, verse 10. It says, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee." Right. Shame covered him when he wrote in his book that the nation would, that he said he knew slavery was evil and that the nation would have to pay for what they did to the Most High's chosen people. And it said tens of millions of enslaved Africans, which are actually Israelites. It says, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever." And that's a future prophecy that didn't take place yet. Because if it did take place, when in history did it take place? Nobody seems to have an answer. Talking to you Bible scholars, you theologian, degree having pastors, y'all don't have an answer for it. So it didn't happen yet. This is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 35 and verse 5. "Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred," meaning everlasting hatred. And what we're going to get to the origin of that hatred after this verse. "Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity." Right, because they helped forward the affliction. They helped forward the affliction. They did it in Jacob's calamity. Right? It says, "In that time that their iniquity had an end." Because right when they took the chains off, right? They took the chains off, and slavery, that form of slavery was at an end. What'd they do? Then you have now you got the Jim Crow era. You got the Jim Crow laws, the segregation, and the poor school systems, and can't vote, and can only work at certain jobs. They help forward the affliction. This Genesis chapter 27 and verse 41, the origin of their perpetual hatred. "And Esau hated Jacob. Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him." And again, that's a blessing that Esau sold. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to bring it to you. Genesis 25 and verse 33. Verse 32. "And Esau said, Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, Swear to me this day. And he swore unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob." So back to Genesis 27:41. So he was mad for the blessing that Jacob received, wherewith his father blessed him, and Esau said in his heart, "The days of mourning," and Esau been thought this since they've been born. He said it, thought of every one of them is deep. And they make a diligent search. They accomplish a search of iniquity. It says, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob." I'm going to read this again and move on. It says, Jefferson openly stated he knew slavery was morally evil and that the nation would eventually have to account to the Most High for what it had done to tens of millions of enslaved Israelites. It says, allow me to translate that for you. Thomas Jefferson was not some victim of time because he just happened to be born in an era in which people were confused as well as slavery was evil. Right, they weren't confused. They knew they knew slavery was evil. But these damn Edomites didn't give a damn. That's why I said the shame shall cover thee. His conscience, the little bit of conscience that Jefferson had, ate him up at the end of his life. Because he know they're going to have to pay for it. See if I can find this precept real quick. Because these Edomites today, they probably believe that their forefathers didn't know if slavery was a good thing or a bad thing. They probably think that their forefathers were confused to the fact if slavery was a good thing or bad thing. And now they're realizing that they have inherited lies. Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 19. Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 19 says, O Lord, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in a day of affliction, the Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. So it wasn't that these Edomites didn't know what was going on. They knew. Now, it says, he knew good and well it was evil then as it would be today, but he deliberately and purposefully maintained the system of slavery, not only in his own life, but also for the nation. As President of the United States, he did absolutely nothing to slow slavery down. As a physical owner of 600 human beings who openly admitted he knew what he was doing was evil, he made a daily decision to be evil. He made a daily decision to be evil. Micah chapter 2 and verse 1. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. So he daily thought on this, on what he would do next, what he would do more wickedly to his 600 slaves, to the 600 Israelite slaves that he had. All right. Says every single time Jefferson is honored, it is a choice to actively ignore the evil he did. Now I'm gonna close out with these remaining scriptures, about 5. The book of Numbers, chapter 35 and verse 33. It says, so you shall not pollute the land wherein ye dwell, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. Alright? And he knew that the nation is going to have to give account for what they did. And that's going to, the way that they're going to give account is going to be put to death. And the remaining ones will be put into slavery. Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 1. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them, and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them, and the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. Just how we would rule over with vigor, right? Working sun up to sundown. It's gonna be the same thing for your Edomites. Y'all ain't gonna get no rest. And if you didn't get it this time, you can get it again. Revelation 13:10. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience and the faith of the saints being the Israelites. When you read Psalms 148th chapter and the 14th verse. Isaiah chapter 61 and verse 4. And they shall build the old waste, and they shall raise up the former desolations. Right? Y'all have to rebuild everything, man. We're not building it. Our hands are getting dirty. And they shall repair the waste cities, the desolations of many generations. Because y'all owe us a lot of reparations. And strangers shall stand and feed your flocks, and the sons of the alien shall be your plowmen and your vine dressers. Right? Y'all gonna be working out in the field. I don't know about what the animals, because you Edomites have a thing with animals. Y'all like mating with animals. So I'm gonna have to keep y'all away from them. Ezekiel chapter 25 and verse 14. And I will lay my vengeance upon Edom by the hand of my people Israel. And they shall do in Edom according to my anger and according to my fury. And they shall know my vengeance, saith the Lord God. Right, you Edomites are going to know the vengeance of the Most High. And you already have a feeling that you're going to know the vengeance anyway. That's why Jefferson wrote that the nation would eventually have to account for the things they did to the Most High's chosen children. Sirach chapter 33 and verse 25. It says, if thou set thy servant to labor, thou shalt find rest. Right? But if thou let him go idle, he shall seek liberty. Right? So if we're not hard on you Edomites, man, y'all going to try to escape. We can't have that. You can try, but then he's going to be put to death. So we're going to have to force y'all to work, man. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it. A yoke and a collar do bow the neck. So are tortures and torments for an evil servant, because y'all going to get tormented and tortured, best believe. Send him to labor, that he be not idle, for idleness teacheth much evil. Right, so we can't have our slaves, man. Can't have our slaves being too idle. If y'all going to try to plot, y'all going to try to plot and get out of your punishment. Try to escape from your captivity. We can't have that. And that's why the Lord said this in Sirach chapter 42 and verse 5. It says, and a merchant's indifferent selling of much correction of children, and to make the side of an evil servant to bleed. So we don't have to be gentle on you Edomites. We're gonna beat the daylights out of you, beat the brakes off you, man. We will not be ashamed to recompense you Edomites by the hand and power of Yahweh Shemel Shai. So hopefully this is an edifying message to the elect, exposing once again the treachery and wickedness of an Edomite, in this case Thomas Jefferson. And with that, I say Shalom.